houses, what other kinds of buildings were in the village?
We had a store, we had a dance hall, and we had a church, and we had a school. Now, I don't want to make any mistakes, but anyway, the Sacred Heart, whoever was in charge, decided we needed a church in the village, and they made about 1/3, the east 1/3 of the building into a classroom, and they started teaching the adults or anybody that was interested to learn the language. So it got to the point where it was really crowded in there, and so there was a gentleman named Ben Hodges. I think everybody in Dodge today has heard that name. Anyway, he supposedly went and talked to the senior or the priest that was in charge, and told him, you need a school in there. You need a church and a school. So the gentleman that was in charge contacted a lot of his friends from back east, and they donated. So I think it's $5,000, and they built a church there. I think it was They started the project in 1913 and finished in 1914. They had the first services there on the Ascension Thursday, I think it is, in 1914. And like I said, they hired Mrs. Faye Burns to be the teacher there. She taught school there. I knew that lady well. She was a real nice lady. But anyway, then after a while, like I said, it became overcrowded. So then they approached the city to build the Coronado School. At that time, it wasn't known as Coronado School; it was just public school. And then later on, the kids took a vote and decided to call it Coronado School. There was a little conflict there because the city said, "Well, that's out of the city limits. I don't know whether we can spend the money building you a school over there." But somehow or other, they got around it, and they built the school. And originally, if I remember correctly, there was only 2 rooms there. And talk about being crowded. I remember when I went to school, we had, I'm going to say about 45, 50 kids in the classroom. We had 4 classes in the bottom grade. It had, I think, 3 classes or 4 in the upper grade. And the teacher comes to mind was Mrs. Lola Crum, and she's been quite a historian. She has written quite a bit about the village. And Mrs. Whited, they used to call her Mrs. White. People couldn't say White, so they called Mrs. White. But her name was Whited. And the principal was Mr. Arthur Scroggins. And he went a lot. I'll give him credit for trying to do the most he could to help us so we could succeed in life. Matter of fact, I was altar boy for a couple of years, and one of the requirements was that if you became an altar boy, you automatically would enroll at Sacred Heart. So that Father Hilary Hernandez, he could call the nuns and say, "I need so-and-so. I'm having a funeral," or the bishop is coming in. At that time, the bishop was situated in Wichita. We didn't have a bishop here. So he would insist that we go to the cathedral. Well, I was fortunate enough to be an altar boy, and so I attended Cathedral, Sacred Heart Cathedral. And so when I went back after attending Cathedral for 2 years, I was way ahead of my class. I'm not bragging. This is a fact. Because you didn't have all of the predicaments that you had at the Coronado School. You had 3 or 4 classes and someone trying to recite, and you're trying to do your lessons. It's distracting. But anyway, over here, you had 1 class per classroom, and I was behind because them kids have all started school at Cathedral. So I had to apply myself, and I figured I can do it. And so I started extra hard, and so I learned quite a bit more. So when I went back to Coronado School, I was way ahead of them kids in paperwork and classwork. So one day, Mrs. Crockett's assigned us a lesson. Well, I got through. It was easy for me. And so I guess I was daydreaming and looking out the window, so he saw me and said, he motioned for me to come up. I said, yes. He said, you're wasting your time. I said, now you can save money, but you can't waste time. Once time is gone, it's gone. You can't recall it. And I said, so? So he said, well, you're wasting your time. I said, well, I completed my lessons. What do you want me to do? So he said, I'm going to teach you. At that time, they had what they call a two-hand sign language. So he said, I want to teach you that. And I said, no, I don't think so. I don't need it. But he says, you never know. This country is in some kind of a war or a skirmish about every 25 years. That's according to history. So he said, you might need it if you get to go overseas, if you get wounded, or if you're out of water, you're out of food, you're pinned down. There's 101 things that can happen to you. And if you know sign language, you can communicate with the other buddies and get by. And I said, no, I don't think so. He said, well, I'll give you a nap. I said, okay, I'll read it. I'll learn it. So I did. I learned it. And it did come in handy because I was called into the military in 1943. And during basic training, I was with a bunch of guys from used guys. They were from New Jersey and from New York. And you want to get some people excited. Tell them you're from New Jersey. Tell the New Yorkers you're from New Jersey, or tell them one from New Jersey you're from New York, and you'll get them excited. And I said, anyway, I used to have a lot of fun with them. And one day, they loved to play cards. And to this day, they think I'm Italian, because most of them were Italian descent. And I could understand what they were saying, because it's so similar to Spanish. And they may emphasize Mexican, because I don't speak Spanish. There are other people think they do, but it's a version of Spanish, yes, but it's not the real Spanish. But anyway, so I could understand them. They would be speaking Italian, and I knew what was going on. I could talk to them, you know. So to this day, they say, "Oh, you're Italian. You're a damn Dago," and I didn't even know what Dago meant. But anyway, so one day, like I said, we were sitting there. We had some kids there. I said kids, at that time they were kids. They were 17, 18, 19 years old. And they came from back east. A lot of them worked in Pennsylvania in the mines, in the coal mines. So I would exchange stories with them, and they told me about their lives. Anyway, one day I told them, I said, you know, we may go overseas together, and I think we probably should learn sign language. And they said, what's that? So I showed them, and they learned it. And after they went over, some went over before I did. Well, I didn't even go overseas. That's when the Sullivan Act came into effect. You had so many brothers in there, they would keep you at home because in case your other brothers got killed, you could carry the family name on. Anyway, it's a long story. But anyway, I got letters from them, and they said they had been wounded, they were bleeding, they couldn't stop the bleeding. So they had taught the medics sign language, so they got word to the medic, and he came up here, stopped their bleeding. So I said, we're sure glad we learned that your sign language from you, because it saved our lives. And I'm grateful for that. But anyway, it was kind of difficult. Like I said, there being in class, there were 45, 50, 60 kids. I don't know how many were in there. There were 4 classes, I know that. And so I have to give the teachers credit for doing the best they could under those circumstances. They really worked. They really tried to help us out.
What did the children do for fun? I know there were so many things they couldn't do. They couldn't go to the movies.
We had, for fun, I remember the first day I attended school. I wasn't going to go to school. I was having too much fun. My older brother, Frank, dragged me to school. And what the best thing that ever happened to me. I enjoyed it. But anyway, I remember we went out for recess, and in Spanish, a lot of your grammar is turned around. I remember this girl coming up there and she said, give me the bald dig. To me, that's perfectly normal. But not in English, and that isn't correct grammar. But she said, "Give me the ball big," you know. And, okay. And we had one ball for, like I said, 45, 50 kids. We had 2 or 3 teeter-totters for that many kids. So we started playing shinny. Shinny was a version of hockey. We'd get a small can of pet milk, because everybody was buying pet milk for their babies, and we would we'd go to the river and get a L-shaped, like a hockey stick, cut it off and bring it up here, and we would play shinny, and most of the time the guys would hit that can and hit you with it, and after you hit it a few times, it was bent, and I mean it hurt when it hit you, and some of them would make their shinny sticks out of metal, and they would hit you with that. I mean, they got your attention right quick.